The finale of Game of Thrones has come and passed, and there's only slightly less heat in the fandom at the moment than there was in King's Landing during the Bells. So here, at the end of all things, figure I'd try another review. If you've been watching my live streams, I did enjoy Season 8 quite a lot. It was not perfect, as no thing is, and there's problems I had with this episode as well. With that said, let's get into the review itself. I think the finale can be broken up into 3 acts. The first act opens with the smoldering ruins of King's Landing, burnt corpses everywhere, Grey Worm executing prisoners, and the absolute shock and horror of Davos, Arya, Tyrion, and Jon at what Dany had done. I felt on watching that these scenes were very effective at bringing home the true monstrosity Daenerys had unleashed on the city, and how her allies were struggling with their new reality. They weren't really following a queen anymore, but instead a full-grown dragon, and they're making difficult choices inside their head about the value of their own lives versus the endless ranks of dead they walked by. Can they continue enabling her? What are the odds the dragon flames would be turned on them next? It was very much like a journey through Mordor, or the fiery plains of hell. I actually saw quite a lot of Return of the King in this episode, but in its own little Game of Thronesy way. We also saw the half-dead Burn Man walking by them, which I thought was a really great touch. It was a reminder for the audience that although the forces of life had defeated the Horde, Dany and Drogon had somehow managed to make even more of the Walking Dead. And that is the real threat for our heroes as they walk through the city. Daenerys had indiscriminately roasted the streets and homes of King's Landing. At one point we saw Arya running for her life from Drogon's seemingly endless flames, with the little girl from Dragonstone that Varys had given his messages to. None of these characters really felt safe anymore, especially since the burning of Varys. None of them are really sure where they stand with Dany, who she really is anymore, what she will do next, and if there is a tomorrow for them as they walk deeper and deeper into the dragon's new lair. Only Grey Worm seemed to truly embrace his role in Daenerys' new world order, which I thought was a fairly effective choice. They bonded over the shared loss of Missandei, they had been together for quite a long time, and they both began slaughtering the people of King's Landing without a word between them. It seems that Grey Worm had adopted her rage. And the conflict between him and Jon that had been boiling for several episodes almost ended in blood. In that dramatic encounter, Jon tries to show mercy for the surrendered Lannisters, that they are, in fact, humans, not just avatars of evil. In Westeros, soldiers are normally given the chance to choose the sword or the wall. Grey Worm's actions shows that he thinks that Dany's word is now law, that the normal customs are over. The paradigm shift is becoming more apparent to Jon, Tyrion, and Davos. Yes, she did actually break the wheel, but she replaced it with something far darker, that they're discovering one blackened corpse at a time. And early on in this first act, I thought it was very effective. Tyrion's journey on his own, away from the rest of the characters and down into the depths of the Red Keep, down into the underworld of the city with a torch. Basically into Smaug's Mountain. In it, he finds only ruins and destructions, the reality of his decision to back a Dragon Lord finally coming home. And then under the rubble, in the Dragon's Skull Gallery, he finally finds Jaime and Cersei, buried under bricks. Some really tremendous acting and a hugely emotional moment for Tyrion. In spite of how much he truly hated Tywin and Cersei, he mourns both of them when they have died. Tyrion's journey through Essos is a multi-year, near-suicidal attempt to come to terms with his murder of Tywin and Shae, and still one that he struggles with. For Tyrion, he did not want things to go this way. He wanted to change Tywin and Cersei's minds about him, to be embraced like Jaime did, to have the family and life he was denied by the fortunes of his birth. We saw in the previous episode that he wanted them to live, that he freed Jaime and gave him an escape plan and a boat, despite how much Tyrion truly hated Cersei and unfortunately failed. Adding on the tensions of these scenes was that at any time Tyrion might turn the corner and come across Daenerys or one of her soldiers, and that was really well done. Because of the way they've used her visually last episode, there was an ever-present feeling that throughout this first act that she might pop up or that she was somehow watching, much like the fiery eye of Sauron. One part I didn't really like is I wasn't quite sure what Arya was doing. She was sneaking around doing her observing thing and more or less served as Jon's conscience for the most part, but there wasn't much she was doing for herself. I said this during my live stream with Shakespeare of Thrones that although they gave Arya an amazing ending and several powerful moments throughout the season, it somehow still felt like they underutilized her, and in this episode as well. Much the same for Davos, he kind of just delivered a few lines and that was kind of it for him. He didn't have a major role in this episode, and not really in the last one either. One thing I enjoyed in particular was Tyrion turning on Daenerys and throwing his Hand of the Queen pin down the stairs, which felt very Ned Stark-like for me, and not the first time I thought Tyrion was going to be killed on the spot. After Daenerys accused him of freeing his brother, he turns and says, "And you burn down the city," and everybody goes silent. After what she had done and how many major characters they had killed off, I thought it was possible that Tyrion was going to finally meet his end. And in true Tyrion fashion, it was almost his mouth that got him killed. And this really underlines the change in Daenerys as a person, because many times in the relationship, Tyrion has told her hard truths acting as Dany's Sir Davos. But this time it was different, and all the Unsullied and Dothraki knew. This time, she had just burned down a city and changed the rules. As for Dany herself, the difference in her character was best shown with the absolutely beautiful imagery that we've seen plastered across social media. Daenerys in her black and red outfit with Drogon's wings stretched out behind her and Drogon screeching. Like I talked about in my Daenerys' Choice video, she has woken the dragon inside of her, become a fully realized scion of Valyria. She had chosen the fear of death and dragonfire over ruling through love. Poor Quentin on Twitter pulled an awesome Lord of the Rings quote about the Balrog of Moria stretching out his wings, and I thought that was exactly what they were going for. I also thought of Lord of the Rings in this moment, as many forget that Sauron was initially a shapeshifter. Among his many forms was his fair appearance, where he would look like an elf, or if he was in Game of Thrones, basically a Valyrian. Yet always behind these shapes was the monster, and that's what I thought they were showing with these wings. The outward appearance of Daenerys, of the amazing Emilia Clarke, masked the raging dragon ready to burn the world beneath her wings. It turns out that she actually had one more dragon to hatch, herself. And now, for the part I know you all are waiting for me to hear talk about. No, not Jon stabbing Dany. No, not Drogon roasting the Iron Throne. It is, of course, Jon referencing the epic speech that Maester Aemon told him all the way back in Season 1, Episode 9. The love is the death of duty speech, which is part of what made me fall in love with Maester Aemon as a character, and truly start to understand Jon's character arc. As I said during my videos on Jon this season and on Girls Gone Canon podcast, Maester Aemon's speech feels almost like a thesis for Jon Snow's character arc, that he's questioning his decisions and comparing what he wants versus what he feels he should do in any particular moment. And never far from his mind, what his dad Ned Stark would do. It's like his life was preparing him to make a decision in this exact moment, what to do when confronted with the woman he loves on one hand and all the people that she was going to kill afterwards. I cheered. I posted on Twitter freaking out that Jon remembers that speech 7 seasons later, and honestly I thought it was a great insight into where Jon's head was in that moment. He was reaching back through time from all the advice from the many characters that have served as father figures for him, from J.R. Mormont to Maester Aemon to Mance Rayder to Ned Stark. All of them were going through his head as he struggled with what he should do. I enjoyed the rest of the scene between him and Tyrion. I agree with the Nauticast guys, where they said this was probably Kit's best acting of the entire series, and it showed. It was very effective. And they actually kind of staged the argument that seemed like it was based on the comments on my Daenerys' Choice video, with Tyrion taking the side of what she actually did versus Jon taking the side that I presented in the video of the many, many losses she had recently felt and how that was affecting her. One note on this conversation though, poor Quentin of the Nauticast podcast had some really excellent thoughts on the use of Nazi allusions in Tyrion's arguments. It's something that really made me think, and I honestly cannot articulate it anywhere near as well as Emmett. So I suggest you go check out the Nauticast podcast and listen to the Iron Throne recap episode. And onto the main event, I found the scene between Jon and Daenerys excellent to watch, and it's something that made me feel things, which is unusual for a TV show. It was so heartbreaking and so well done that at the end of the world, these two would find themselves in this situation, and their conflicting paths that are intersecting at that moment. The opening shot of Jon, by the way, approaching Drogon, who greeted him like a sleepy puppy, wasn't really something I was prepared for, and I think really set the message that Jon didn't know what he was going to do in this moment. That if Jon really had violence on his mind, Drogon may have noticed the tension in him and reacted. Also in particular, I love the way Emilia portrayed the moment of Dany finally touching the throne she's been seeking for so long. Like she was Gollum, studying and finally grasping the Ring of Power again among the fires of Mount Doom, which I think was definitely the message we were supposed to get, especially with Drogon later roasting the throne that it represented for Dany so much more than just political power. It was the struggle of a lifetime, an endless sea of blood and corpses behind her, and the years of pain she went through to get there. And then she comments that it's much smaller than she imagined, perhaps hinting for a moment that this was a bit of a letdown for her. The reality of her victory wasn't really matching up to how she imagined it in her head. And on the other side of the ice and fire equation, we have Jon trying desperately to find a way out of what Tyrion insisted he must do. But he knows in his heart he has to do what he thinks Ned might have done. Bring justice to Dany for the thousands upon thousands she killed in King's Landing, and the many more she promised to kill across the world. Jon kept asking her questions, starting off with the killing of the surrendered Lannisters, by proxy asking about the rest of the city she destroyed. He's trying to find the Dany he knew, and really only finds the dragon. Dany's delusion in the scene was also amazing. She knows Jon and Tyrion have had huge problems with what she just did, and yet Jon walked in armed and she has no guards around, and she just launches into telling him how she'll make a better world by burning it down, as if that's something that's not terrifying. You can almost hear Maester Aemon's words echoing in Jon's head back when he asked Maester Aemon whether or not he should let the wildlings through the wall.
I need your advice. There's something I want to do, something I have to do. But it'll divide the Night's Watch. Bitterly. Half the men will hate me the moment I give the order.
Half the men hate you already, Lord Commander. Do it.
But you don't know what it is.
That doesn't matter. You do.
That if Jon knew it was right, then whatever the fallout is, whatever the consequences, he should do it, even if it is his lover and his queen. He faced this choice after their alliance saved the world from death by ice, and if he would let it die in fire instead. Like the Robert Frost poem the book series takes its name from. Some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. From what I've tasted of desire, I hold with those who favor fire. But if I had to perish twice, I think I know enough of hate to say that for destruction, ice is also great and would suffice. Also, I don't think this was really like a fist-pumping happy moment, or even if I really think Jon did the right thing. He doesn't know himself in classic Jon Snow fashion. The end of Dany's life was tragic and very, very sad, as was most of her life. Somewhere deep down inside, she was still that girl who just wanted a simple life playing, and instead the world demanded that she become a dragon and shaped her into the weapon she became, or die. Also a fun note, Jon was channeling Ned's line from the very first episode.
You understand why I did it?
Jon said he was a deserter.
But do you understand why I had to kill him?
Our way is the old way.
The man who passes the sentence should swing the sword.
Jon held her in his arms, heard her final words, looked her in the eyes, and then swung the sword. It's not a moment I'll probably stop thinking about anytime soon. And then after she died, Drogon nuzzling her was almost too much. He really wasn't a dragon in that moment. He was her child trying to wake his fallen mother. And although the internet has been memeing Drogon melting the Ring of Power in the fires of Mount Doom, I thought it was an effect of the connection that Dany and Drogon had. They clearly understood each other at some deep level that seemed very close to what the Starks and the Direwolves had. As soon as she was stabbed by Jon, Drogon cried out and came looking for her. So perhaps on some level he understood that her desire for the throne led her to her death and this place. Or maybe in some second life sense, Dany saved Jon from Drogon's wrath with whatever part of her still lingered, and melted the Iron Throne instead. Whatever the exact reasoning behind that moment, it was a really powerful metaphor that I really enjoyed, that a dragon was destroying the last remnant of the conquest and leaving Westeros, maybe forever. Overall, I thought this first act of the finale was really, really great. It was well shot, visuals were incredible, the scene construction was amazing, the acting was fantastic, and how they set up that Jon could even get to the place that he would kill Dany was great. Not all of it was perfect though. As Shakespeare Thrones said from my finale stream, she would have liked to see more of evil Dany, and I think I would agree with that. Maybe some more atrocities being carried out in her name, or her burning some more lords, or something along those lines. On the other side of that though, the Wings really sold the message for us as the viewers, but for Jon and Tyrion's perspective, there could have been a little bit more to justify what they were saying. And there were parts of Tyrion and Jon's debate that probably could have been improved, and I really wish there was more for Davos and Arya to do during this whole section. And on to the second act. This is the one I didn't really like very much. The smash cut time skip from the death of Daenerys to this council was pretty jarring, and they needed to have the characters deliver a lot of exposition to even explain what was happening. I felt like it would have been much more effective if they had perhaps shown the armies outside of King's Landing and Grey Worm on the walls. Maybe a scene with him facing Jon in the prison cell, or really anything other than just some hard cut to an amount of time passing. And this is perhaps kind of minor, but I thought they just could have named everyone that was at the Great Council, like a herald, or having Tyrion acknowledge them all, or Sansa introduce them, just so that we, the audience, understood who was here. Like, a lot of people had thought maybe Howland Reed was the man in between Edmure and Samwell Tarly. The new Prince of Dorne didn't get a name, nor the man sitting next to Jon Royce, who somehow survived the Battle of Winterfell. At this point, this could have been maybe a whole nother episode, stretching out the Jon and Tyrion time in custody and the setup to this council, all the people traveling down and hearing the news, and perhaps seeing Bran's reaction. This part was pretty unnecessarily brief, and one of the more glaring parts where they could have split this last episode in two. In contrast to that, I thought the content of the council was pretty good. Clearly, Bran had made a fan of Tyrion Lannister, and they gave Peter Dinklage an amazing ending monologue for him to perform. And who doesn't enjoy a good dunking on Edmure Tully too, as Sansa told her uncle to sit down. In a later video, I'm going to go more into the decision to crown Bran and what that really means for the rest of the kingdom, so I'm not really going to talk about it much here, other than to say I thought the rationale made a fair amount of sense. Bran at this point is an all-knowing, all-seeing deity, and as Tyrion and Sansa pointed out, he may not be able to have children ever to inherit the throne. Whether or not that's true, for the Great Council, that idea is a major selling point. What they were establishing in this moment was a way for themselves and their descendants to one day maybe take the crown for their own family when Bran dies without maybe a war. They vote for anyone else, there's probably a pretty good chance the non-hereditary part of the throne is quickly forgotten, as has often happened. The Night's Watch even has had civil wars where Lord Commanders decided that their sons should follow them without an election among the men. To the Great Lords, Bran is a safe choice for them to get their own chance later at elevating their family to the throne. Yeah, about that. I really had no problem with Bran becoming King of Westeros. I just wish they had done the sequence a bit differently and stretched it out. Like, it would have been powerful if they had brought Jon before them, with half of them knowing his true identity, and him explaining maybe why he had to kill Dany, and suggesting Sansa or Bran as the new monarch instead of himself. Also, some acknowledgement between Arya and Gendry would have been interesting. I also would have enjoyed a scene in the jail where maybe Jon and Arya have moments to talk over what he went through, since she too has experience with assassination and dealing with the guilt that follows. Or early on in the episode. And then we get to the third act, or basically the epilogue for the series. Tyrion is named Hand of the King, which I thought was a solid choice by Bran. He's already personally shown a lot of trust in Tyrion this season, and he's probably seen everything Tyrion has done from birth to present. And I don't really think Tyrion has much to answer for despite Grey Worms and some of the fandom's protests. When he saw what Dany did, he quit his hand and had tried to find a way for the city to surrender before the sack happened. That Daenerys and her troops overruled those attempts isn't really Tyrion's fault. Anyway, much like I identified in my Does Bran Have a Plan video, Bran identified Tyrion as a key person in whatever he was doing. It has now identified him to work off his debt to the realm as Hand of the King. And you have to assume much the same about the new members of King Bran's small council, the Master of Coin Bronn, the Master of Ships Davos, Bran Maester Sam, and Lord Commander Brienne. I found this fairly comforting that after 8 seasons of all-out war and destruction and fire and blood and the icy demons beyond the wall, that we just found normal, boring government problems were just returning. Bickering between the small council and banter and people talking rather than coming at each other with swords. In particular, I thought Bronn didn't really do much for this season, and I thought this was maybe the best use of his character. It was the old style Bronn, the one that was prodding Tyrion when he was Hand of the King last time. It kind of felt like going home. And the part of the sequence I really love, that Samwell slammed down the completed version of the A Song of Ice and Fire by Archmaester Ebros in one enormous illuminated volume that I want more than anything. Like seriously, whatever that thing costs, they should make it and we will buy it. Up next in the epilogues, there was Lord Commander Sir Brienne opening the Kingsguard White Book and modifying Jaime's entry. That moment had a lot of fans ugly crying, and I was pretty close to it myself. I found it very touching that Brienne was personally going in to fill in Jaime's legacy. No one except Cersei knew Jaime as well as Brienne by the end. She had seen him at his most heroic and his lowest moments, and at times Cersei was even jealous of their closeness. Although it would have been pretty funny to see Brienne drag him across history, as the many memes have been saying. That's not really who Brienne is. She shoulders the pain of her life and does what she thinks is right. And that's laying out who Jaime was for all his faults and all of his triumphs. And kind of an ambiguous touch to the end, saying that Jaime died defending his queen without really saying which queen that was. I'm sure some future maester will lose their minds trying to parse that line, and trying to uncover the relationship between Sir Brienne of Tarth and Sir Jaime Lannister. How scandalous. That whole sequence was something that I always wanted but never thought we would get. It's really the bittersweetness of both of them almost getting their happy endings only to be snatched away by reality. And it's very touching that it's Brienne who gets to tell Jaime's story, and Lord Commander Brienne, the first female knight, member of the Kingsguard and Lord Commander. She even found a spot on the Kingsguard for her loyal squire, Podrick Payne. Really well done, hit me right in the feels. It was a wonderful sequence. Next up we have Jon, who has to be exiled for his crime of killing Daenerys, as Grey Worm insists, but he's kind of exiled to the Night's Watch, which doesn't really exist. So although Jon is being officially punished, King Bran has set him free to do basically whatever he wants in the North. It's a bit like when you get grounded as a kid in your bedroom, but that's where all your favorite stuff is anyway. And we got the Game of Thrones version of the Grey Havens from Lord of the Rings. Jon, or Frodo, with the ring destroyed and the Dark Lords defeated, sails away from his family and friends on the docks to the Undying Lands in the far north. That's one of those things I keyed into as the season went on from other much smarter people in the fandom, that the connection between Jon and Frodo, when I think the logical connection was Jon and Aragorn. It appears that instead the two characters got merged. When I read Fire and Blood, one story in particular that resonated with me, and with a lot of the fandom, was the adventures of Alyssa Farman. Very similar character to like Asha Greyjoy or Arya Stark. She took her custom ship Sunchaser from Braavos and explored as far west of Westeros as she could go. It's even hinted that she made it all the way to Asshai by the Shadow. Personally, I love stories about ships and traveling, and would have loved to see Alyssa Farman's adventures on the screen, and we kinda got it. Arya decided to pull her best Alyssa Farman, got her custom direwolf-themed ship, and takes off like the legend she is to chase the sun. No more killing or revenge, but just pure adventure and exploring like she has always enjoyed, leaving Westeros and her past behind, rejecting the life that was set out for her, which has really always been her way. Sansa as well got an incredibly satisfying ending. And by the way, with her dress that, according to Michelle Clapton, that is supposed to evoke Marjorie Tyrell, Robb Stark, Arya, Jon, and even the Weirwoods. Sansa is crowned queen in the North. And actually the last words in the series are the Northmen cheering for her as queen like they did for Jon and Robb before her. This is almost like the dream ending for Sansa, a complete wonderful arc from the scared proper girl who had trouble finding her own voice to taking her home back towards independence and making herself queen of it. Few characters in the series have been better prepared or more worthy to wear a crown than Sansa, even has the boldness to remove the North from the rest of the kingdoms. This was incredibly satisfying and well done, and it kind of went against the nihilism of Game of Thrones. I think most of us expected as we head into this last episode that everyone would end up horribly sad and scarred and just the worst for wear all the way around. Not Sansa. She's become a fully realized Lady of Winterfell and has put herself in a position to be maybe one of the most effective leaders that Westeros has ever seen. And then of course we get Jon's ending. This may end up being another video too, but this was the one that really got me. He ends up back at the wall, sees Tormund, but what he sees is Ghost. And he goes up and gives Ghost the scratch that everyone was confused he didn't give him at the end of episode 4 when he left Winterfell behind. Well, turns out this is why they were holding that back. He was always going to go back and give Ghost his pets. He even changed back into his Night's Watch outfit, really seemed at home and happy in a way that he hasn't for a long time. Perhaps the last time he seemed this happy was when it was him and Ygritte, riding together in the north. And hey, he's with another redhead, Tormund. For Jon, he had the choice if he wanted to become Aegon Targaryen, become a dragon, and rule Westeros. It turns out he decided he didn't want to be, and he would rather go back home and embrace being a Stark and the old gods and his direwolf. A lot of people have been asking, what is the point of RLJ if Jon doesn't end up with a dragon or doesn't end up on the throne? Isn't that the point of a secret prince? And I don't really think so, because so much of Game of Thrones has been about questions of identity and choice about those. Jon chooses to be Jon Snow rather than Aegon Targaryen, and changes his destiny for it. And also how his humble upbringing in Winterfell really kept him shielded from what power does to other characters in the series, like Stannis Baratheon or Daenerys, who know they are supposed to be prophesized heroes, that they have destinies to save the world, and that knowledge really crushes them and takes them down very dark paths to doing things they never thought they would. Jon's one of those characters too, but he was spared from it because, as they say, Jon Snow knows nothing. It's almost the sort of dream that Dunk laid out for Egg to his father Maekar, when he makes the argument for why Egg should go with him instead of stay with the royal family and eat steaks and go to tourneys. That humility is important, and this was my moment that almost got me crying. It was when Jon rode out from underneath the wall with Ghost next to him. It was the perfect ending, that through all of this, Jon and Ghost stayed together and rode off to make the future that they want, rather than the one being forced on him because of his name or his destiny or anything else. It's the future they chose. Of course, you guys, I noticed the connections between Waymar Royce and Jon Snow here. Killing of a Ranger 1 and 2, they brought it back. The opening scene of Game of Thrones with Waymar at the gates is imitated with Jon leaving through them. Shakespeare Thrones from my live stream also had a great catch on Twitter, where she said that although the books begin with a bunch of rangers leaving through the gates, it's really a depressing beginning. None of them were happy to be doing it. It leads to their deaths. The prologue is a very dark scene, but in this case, these characters are leaving beyond the wall, but with hopefulness. And you can even see in the snow that little bits of green are coming up, and among the wildlings there's many children running with them. It really is the dream of spring. Overall, I really love this episode. I would say it was probably about an 8 or 9 out of 10. As I mentioned, I did have problems with it. There are things they could have done better. It probably should have been 2 episodes. They really could have given more to do for the secondary characters. But if you're gonna squeeze it down to 1 episode, you're probably just gonna focus on the main ones. Otherwise though, I thought it was a really fitting ending, and I'm very happy with where they left a lot of the characters. Although they did kind of leave the door open for a lot of sequels here. We'll see if they do anything with that.